Welcome back, everyone. This is The Changelog. We're a member-supported blog, podcast, and weekly email covering what's fresh and what's new in open source. Check out the blog at thechangelog.com, our past shows at 5by5.tv/changelog, and subscribe to The Changelog Weekly. That's our weekly email we send out covering everything that hits our open source radar. You don't want to miss it. Subscribe at thechangelog.com/weekly. And you're listening to episode 118, and John Long is joining me to talk about Sass, the Sass Way, thesassway.com, by the way, open publishing on GitHub, Middleman, Serve, and a bunch of cool topics. We had a fun conversation. Today's show is sponsored by DigitalOcean, FreshBooks, and TopTal. We'll tell you a bit more about FreshBooks later in the show, and also TopTal as well. But DigitalOcean, we're hosted on DigitalOcean. We've been working with DigitalOcean for several months now. They're a partner of ours, and they're a simple cloud hosting provider that's dedicated to offering the most intuitive ways to spin up a cloud server. In literally 55 seconds, you can have a full-on server created with root access, and you're off to the races. It just doesn't get any easier than that, really. Pricing plans start affordably at $5 a month for half a gig of RAM, 20 gigs of drive space. That's SSD drive space, by the way. 1 CPU, 1 terabyte of transfer. And if you only need the server for a little bit, for a couple hours or for a couple days or for a week, they even have it where you can rent by the hour, basically, and it costs just 0.007 of a cent an hour. That's less than a penny an hour. Super affordable. We got a special promo code just for our listeners. Use the promo code ChangelogApril to get a $10 credit when you sign up. Head to DigitalOcean.com to get started. And now, on to the show. We're joined today by my good friend John Long. John, I guess this show is kind of funny because I wanted to have you back on the show. This is not your first time on the Changelog, so it's kind of like welcome back too, right?
Yeah. I think the last time we were on here, I was talking about Radiant.
Yeah.
So it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And the funny part is that I gotta say, 3 years ago now we started the Sass Way, the blog, the Sass Way?
Yeah.
Was it 3 years ago?
It's getting to the point where it's hard for me to remember how long ago it was. I think it is right around 3.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think 3 yers ago, though. I don't even know. But, yeah, so I wanted to have you back on the show, one, because you're pretty awesome, and two, we've got this kind of, I guess, somewhat of a new announcement. It's been about 2 weeks or 3 weeks now since we've had this out there, but the Sass Way, just to kind of fill everybody in, thesassway.com is a blog John and I started together. Maybe we're saying roughly 3 years ago. We'll figure out the exact mark there, but
looks like it was 2011.
Was it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was around, I guess, July, August 2011. Yeah, so we're coming up.
So roughly 3 years.
Yeah, just shy. But so we started this blog because we were super passionate about writing CSS the Sass Way, and so we wanted to be the Sass jerk, so to speak. We wanted to be that person to tell the world about Sass and compare it to, various ways you can do it with CSS, but make your code more readable, or use mix-ins, or use libraries and all this fun stuff. So we wanted to share our great fun stuff with the Sass Way. And you had a project called Sass Watch that you started with Brandon Mathis, who's also core contributor to Compass, works at Mongo HQ, and he's pretty well known actually for Octopress, right?
Yeah. Although I'm not sure, I'm not sure if Brandon was involved. I know I had asked him at one point if he would be interested in being a part of it, but he's a busy guy, and I didn't get a whole lot of traction on that. I think I was doing that for. It wasn't long. It was actually just a month or so by the time you contacted me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, before, I guess unless we assume somebody went back and listened to, I'm not even sure what the episode was that you were on before that we gave you your other intro here on the Changelog. But for those who may not know who John W. Long is, who are you, John?
So I'm a user interface designer. I work for User Voice. We make help desk and feedback software. I live in Cary, North Carolina. Work in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Past accomplishments is Radiant CMS and
Yeah, I was the
Serve
creator
and a
of
couple
Radiant
others.
CMS, and I also serve, a number of open source projects on GitHub. Yeah.
Are you still involved with Ruby Lang and I guess the site at least?
You know what? That seems like it's picked up traction. They moved away from Radiant at a certain point, and I've just been happy to see that other people care about that site and are maintaining it, which is great.
Are you still involved in Radiant then, or no?
I guess officially I still am, but unofficially I haven't been involved with the project for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? You're pretty happy, or just whatever?
I mean, I still have a lot of things that I would love to see Radiant be able to do. But honestly, most of the stuff that I work on nowadays, I'm very content to use a static site generator. I mean, having the site in a database, unless you're working with like multiple people, or is kind of a drag.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great to be able to check stuff into Git and, and even deploy through Git on like Heroku or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to update it. There was a lot of work that went into it when I first worked on it, pushed it out. I think I worked on it like 8 months, almost solid. And I just don't have that kind of time to devote to it anymore. At this point, Jim Gay, shout out to him, Saturn Flyer on Twitter, has been maintaining Radiant for a number of years and has done a great job at it. So I'm very content to let him lead the charge with that. And Jim actually runs kind of a web consultancy and is building sites every day with Radiant CMS. So I think he's the right guy to work on it. I think one of the things that was hard for me was after I created Radiant, I ended up not building a lot of content-oriented websites. Instead, my career sort of went towards web applications.
It's kind of funny how that works out, right?
Applications in general. And so, yeah, there's times when I feel like I'm kind of isolated for that problem space. I don't understand it as well.
Yeah.
So.
What's a good tee up for what we've done with the Sass Way? So the Sass Way started out as a Nesta CMS, which is a Ruby file based, I guess is the probably easiest way to say it, is a static site. I don't think Nesta has. I think it might have that feature, but it's not meant to be a generator. It's meant to be basically a flat file based CMS written in Ruby.
Right.
And that was a great project. It's what helped lift it off the ground. You and I were able to easily tee that up pretty quickly. We deployed it to Heroku. It was, super fast because we took advantage of like varnish and caching and other things that Heroku provides and all the other things that just a flat file system kind of CMS provides. But here, about 3 weeks ago, we took this turn to finally, like we said, the site's been out there for almost 3 years. And our original model was kind of to, go out to the SaaS world and sort of recruit those that were, for lack of better terms, movers and shakers, people that were sharing, their knowledge with the SaaS community on how to best write CSS the SaaS way. And you and I talked, I would say probably like 8 months ago, about open sourcing the Sass Way. And oddly enough, and I'll come clean, but I felt a little apprehensive about doing it. I don't know why, but I'm really glad you forced us to do it because I think it's really a much better fit for the content the way it is. So why don't you share with the listeners why you feel passionate about how the Sass Way meets up with this Git flow, kind of check your content into Git kind of mentality, this sort of open publishing way of doing things.
Yeah, I think part of it for me has just been over the last couple of years getting more and more familiar with the way GitHub works with pull requests and all that. I mean, we're passionate users of Git at User Voice and probably about every other company these days. And that workflow of just being able to work on a change, push it into a branch, ask for people to review it, comment on it, whatever, merge. It just seems ideal for building text-based documents, I guess you could say. One aspect of it too is we're a blog about HTML and CSS and Sass, and so like having the ability to quickly drop in and write that kind of code alongside writing code for an article is pretty awesome. So, I mean, in general, the fact that it is a static file-based content management system, it's all checked in on there on GitHub. It means it's a lot easier for people to come alongside and submit new articles. Also, make changes, fix things on the site if it's not displaying correctly. And really, I think the big thing that I love about this is that we've reversed the trying to go out and recruit people kind of scenario, which we still try and recruit people to write stuff on the Sass Way, to it being also something where people can come to us and say, hey, I have an idea for this article. What would you think? And then they fork the repository, they write it up and send us a pull request. And, we've had 2 articles, I guess, since we opened it up this way. And these are from people that we didn't know about. And they've worked out to be fantastic articles for us, filling, some holes in what we had. And so one of the things that I've struggled with too is that sometimes you really need an article on a topic, but one of your go-to people, I guess, is not doesn't really want to write about that. And so really freeing up just for anybody to be able to contribute to it has been, I think, a very good thing for the Sass Way. Yeah.
I mean, considering that Sass and Compass, and I guess the Sass world is known to be, it's their open source technologies anyways, it would make sense to, and this is why I said I self-admitted that I was sort of the bottleneck. I mean, it's kind of funny too that the fact that, I help lead the changelog who, focuses on what's fresh and new and open source. And here I am being a little apprehensive about opening up this publishing flow just because I think part of me doesn't want to lose control. But then I learned something along this path that I realized that it wasn't really control we were trying to achieve. It was really openness. And I think the last probably, few weeks, I've really changed my idea because I've been closely involved in this project being open source and kind of helping curate this content and manage it. It's I can see now the light, so to speak.
Yeah.
By having it open. So like you said, it's really easy for someone to fork the repository and, don't worry about messing up. There is no such thing as messing up. And, they send us an idea. In worst case scenario, we help them evolve that idea of an article into something even better, and that helps lift up the the Sass community. And like you'd mentioned, having a certain topic to kind of write upon, we don't always have a go-to person on the team already to kind of write one of those, and somebody can bring that idea to us, and it's a lot easier. And I like the way too also how we've kind of dissected the Sass Way as content. You got beginner, which makes sense because not everybody is a Sass guru, so to speak. No one really has an expertise. Not everybody has an expertise level. And then you got intermediate, and then you got advanced, and that's fit pretty well too. Can you speak to maybe how that's played into helping the community kind of with training wheels, so to speak, get to mastery with Sass?
Well, I mean, the best way to kind of answer that, in my opinion, is that I've been using Sass for a number of years, and I know it pretty well backwards and forwards. But even so, for some reason, I can never remember the syntax for like how to write a for loop in Sass. And
So hang on. Do you go back to the article then and keep refreshing yourself?
So the funniest thing is that like I'll just type it into Google like for loop Sass, and like the first thing that comes up is an article on the Sass Way, on how to write for loops and if statements and things like that. And so I really see us, and I think we've kind of gone back and forth a little bit about, are we a news organization, or are we, are we trying to stay sort of current in the things that we're writing about? I mean, normally, like with a blog, it's like this progressive series of ideas that, you're blogging about. But the Sass Way has really become much more the website about tutorials, and the best tutorials that you can find on Sass, for the most part, are curated and kept here on the Sass Way. So I definitely see it as like I feel like the service that we're providing in the Sass community is just that easy onboarding and like understanding how to use Sass, how to structure your Sass projects, all of that kind of stuff. We're trying to write about it to help and assist you. And so for a number of the just getting started sort of topics, I think we've been a great strength to the Sass community in that regard, making it so much easier for people to get on board. So that's where kind of I would see the beginner stuff in particular. We just had one of the articles that was contributed was on choosing great variable names, and in some ways, it's a really simple article, but he's pointing out that this guy Frank from South Africa is just pointing out that naming variables like red and blue and green and things like that, and using those throughout your code isn't a good idea. Instead, using variable names like brand color or accent color, or trying to think of the semantic sort of value that you're capturing there, is helpful. And while for somebody who's been writing code for a long time, that might seem just so obvious that you should, choose good variable names. For people that the thing that we have to remember is that a lot of people that are using Sass are people that have come to it from the design world, not the coding world, and they need tips on like how to code well. And so yeah, I think I've kind of gotten off track here, but
no, I feel you though. I mean, I think the point you're making there that's really important is that while that particular article you're talking about from Frank seems simplistic, it's the obvious sometimes that I think we serve the Sass community because, yeah, sure, it makes sense that, that variables should be, should have semantic names and they should make sense, but not everybody really understands that. And I think it almost feels like a position that the community blesses. Like this is a community guideline, for lack of better terms. And because it ends up on the Sass Way and makes it through this open publishing model where everyone who watches and stars the repo kind of gets these updates. Like there's a new issue, there's a new pull request, there's some dialogue happening about this particular article, and it gets through this system that even though it's an obvious idea, choosing great variable names, sure, that is obvious, but I think the way Frank, and even the comment you left today, pointing back to Gina's style guide for Sasslang, that's remarkable. Like, she's got all these different colors identified, and they're not like slightly pink and a little bit more pink. It's like hot bush and bouquet and Venus. They got like cool names, and I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and then she uses those colors. She assigns them to like text colors, and accent colors, and background colors. Yeah. I mean, I would see us as kind of a jumping off point to kind of discuss best practices and how they're implemented. There's been a number of articles where the way that I finish it up is just, hey, go check out these other repositories.
Right.
Go look at what Compass does. Go look at these other projects, Octopress and other things, to see how you structure your Sass projects or other things like that. So some of it, I know Sass community has been really blessed with some very talented people working on the Sass laying website. But a lot of where they're at right now is just kind of informational, just trying to help people download and get started with Sass kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the Sass Way is more about that conversation and, how to use Sass in your everyday life kind of thing.
Yeah, a while back, someone asked me, I can't recall who it was, but somebody said, well, this, Sass has good documentation and so does Compass. Why are you guys creating this blog? Like, what's the point? And I'm like, well, not everybody wants to go and read documentation. I mean, documentation is great. You need it. It works. But to get started, somebody doesn't go always to the docs and say, okay, let me just get lost in there. You kind of need this guide. And I feel like what we've done with the Sass Way, and what we try to do at least, what we invite people to do, and the reason why we've open sourced it to invite everyone to fork it and submit their article and pull request, is that going to the docs and reading those isn't always an easy way to get started, or an easy way to reach mastery, or to know that there's a better way to do variable naming. Sometimes you need somebody from the community to kind of guide you through that, and that's sort of like, the documentation serves that, but it's a little dry, whereas we kind of bring it to life.
We bring it to life, and I think we kind of show like how you practically use something.
Yeah.
So, like to give you an example, I wrote an article a couple of months ago about mix-ins for semi-transparent colors, and how do you provide like browser fallbacks? Not all browsers support RGBA colors. And since they don't, like particularly Internet Explorer 8, like how can you use Sass to make your life easier with calculating two sets of colors for those attributes? And so that's what that article's about. But what you're introduced to is, functions like the RGBA. You're also introduced to mix-ins in the course of the article, and you're like seeing like how these are developed, what the thought processes are behind that, and you might come across something like default attributes or something like that you didn't know about before. So I think a lot of what we do is sort of a community awareness kind of thing, just encouraging people to talk about and think about Sass and how they're using it in that regard, and sort of learn. You're not going to read documentation from page 1 to the end kind of thing.
Right.
Instead, you're going to pick up and try and use what you have, and sometimes you don't realize there are better ways to do that. So by giving these practical articles, people are able to jump in, see how someone else is doing something, and learn from that. So
let's pause the show for just a minute and give a shout out to our sponsor, TopTal. For those of you out there who are freelancing, or maybe you'd like to freelance, or even kind of try out a freelance-like project while you're maintaining your full-time position, you have to check out TopTal. TopTal is a new, rapidly growing network of some of the most elite engineers in the world. They're distributed all across the globe. Their primary focus is connecting their ecosystem of top engineers and top companies. You work on special projects with companies like Airbnb, IDEO, Zendesk, and many others. You can work remotely, on a beach, or anywhere in the world. To get started, head to toptal.com/developer and click Join TopTal. That's a nice big old green button. You cannot miss it. That's TOPTAL.com/developer. Let's talk about the process of taking the Sass Way and making it open source. What I know that I did the original design, and then the second redo, I guess, is pretty much all you. Like you took the old repo, pulled all the content out, moved us to Middleman, and a bunch of other fun stuff. You used Sass, I'm sure, behind the scenes to, write the styles. Did you use a framework? What was the process of like redesigning and then going open source?
Yeah, so we had a number of reasons to redesign. One was that we really wanted to update the logo and sort of the feel of the site. Sass had the woman on the phone,
right? The sassy lady with the phone in her hand.
The sassy lady with the phone in her hand, and
Hampton has a funny story about that.
With the Sass website, they redesigned the logo, and we wanted to update our branding to kind of reflect that. So that was part of what motivated me sort of getting in, rethinking the design. I think, from a higher level, I was also interested in just kind of simplifying some of the things. We wanted the site to be more responsive. One of the things that I'm learning more and more of is that a lot of times people are reading these things on the go, whether you're
on mobile, for sure,
whether you're on the bus or, frankly, on the toilet at work. You're pulling it up on your phone and you're looking at it, and you're reading your Twitter stream.
Why do they got to be at work while they're on the toilet? Why at work?
I'm trying to think of a productive reason to be on the toilet.
Okay.
Anyway, so the mobile side of it was part of it. I think the other thing that I was really kind of interested in too was in just illustrating, particularly some of the modular CSS stuff I've been writing about on the Sass Way for a while. I wanted to spend some time to kind of make our CSS more modular in that regard. So a lot of things there. We ended up, I had been playing around with Middleman, and Middleman to me, I can't really say enough good things about it. I've created my own thing, Serve, which is kind of in the same space. It's really for rapid prototyping Rails applications, but it also generates static sites, kind of similar to Middleman. Middleman, to me, is kind of the Ruby has had a series of static sites generators. Nesta.
The oldest one is Static-Matic.
Static-Matic. There's really like 6 or 7 of them that have like played a major sort of role in it. And Middleman is kind of the latecomer, but he's sort of learned from everybody in terms of like what people want to do with their static sites. Jekyll's another one of them. And Middleman has this plugin architecture and sort of a data model that those two things really make it a killer content management system.
Yeah.
I actually, they have plugins for doing the blog portion of it, and I ended up just writing a little Ruby code and helpers to pull out the information I needed instead of actually using the plugin that they have. Because the structure of our site was significantly different than if we had chosen to use their blog plugin. And it was impressive to me that I was still able to, you can do things like go through the list of all of the pages on your site and, grab their summaries and filter them in different ways. And having the ability to do that, in code to build those category pages and other things like that we needed. And to do it exactly according to our old structure was just amazing. I thought we were going to have to, do a lot more with redirects or something like that when we upgraded the site.
It's always tough when you move a site from even one similar system, because Nesta wasn't very far off from Middleman, honestly. I mean, they're pretty similar monsters, but obviously a slightly different structure. But the URLs that we chose originally were meant to be short and sweet, not, extra category sections and segments in the URL. It was pretty straightforward. So I was really happy with that too, that we were able to keep the URL structure. One, just because it fit, and two, just to not have to do the redirects like you mentioned.
Right. And I think, I mean, one of the things that I was really pleased with was it was almost like I was just deleting code in order to make it work well in Middleman. And what I mean by that is that there were times where we had, like, in Nesta, had to use like multiple partials and sort of like these hacks to like go around things. And in Middleman, when the final product was there were like less files that had to be used to like get it. And so it's
even Middleman and Jekyll, though, for those listening and thinking like, you know, Middleman, Jekyll, how do you choose and why do we choose Middleman? They're very similar. I mean, even they both have the front matter. They both have similar ecosystems. And I think Jekyll's starting to get a lot more new life with Parker taking over and taking the helm of, you know, leading that. I mean, it's growing into its own thing as well. And Octopress has always been there leading the way as well with it. But Middleman, like you had said, is kind of like in this middle ground of, and the usability of it's really, really nice as well. And the fact that it's got that plugin ecosystem, and it's got tons of stuff like a blog plugin and all sorts of cool stuff that you can do with it.
Yeah, it's I mean, my feeling is I would much rather use Middleman, and I've used Jekyll before. Jekyll just seems to be it sort of pushes you into that blog paradigm kind of thing. It's a little bit like WordPress years ago, how every WordPress site was like a blog kind of thing.
Right. First it was a blog, and then you kind of morphed it into a site.
And now it's become more of a content management system, WordPress has, or at least that's my understanding. I haven't used WordPress in years. But I think Jekyll's on a similar journey. But Middleman is a content management system first. And in my mind, it just makes a lot more of the decisions the right way in that regard. So yeah, I'm a huge fan, and I mean, Serve basically competes with Middleman on in some people's minds as well. So, you know, I'm a passionate Middleman user, and I wrote my own thing. So
yeah, I was always I always wondered about that too, because you know, I was a huge fan of your Serve framework, which, like you had said, is very similar to Middleman and competes with it. And I think there was even a point too when I was like, man, Middleman really requires a ton. Whenever you do, you know, gem install Middleman, a lot comes with it. And I think with Serve, you kind of leverage Tilt a lot more. And was it Tilt, or what was the one particular library that the Ruby library you were leveraging to kind of keep things, you know, less dependencies? Do you recall?
I mean, I didn't. Well, okay, so Rack is probably what you're talking about. Originally, Serve was not built on Rack, and at a certain point, we rewrote it so that it was on top of Rack. And at a certain point, we rewrote it so that it was on top of Tilt as well. So I think Middleman and Serve are fairly comparable in that regard now. I still feel like Serve. What I love about Serve, particularly using it in unstructured mode, you can just throw a bunch of files in a directory and, you know, just type the serve command, and it knows how to, you know, serve up Sass if you want Sass, or serve up, you know, the other stuff. But when you get to something, so it's almost like the code pen tool kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's sort of where Serve's sweet spot is. But when you get to something a little bit bigger and really a site that you want to manage, I think Middleman wins hands down. I'd still probably use Serve for prototyping Rails apps. One of the things that I love about it is that for the most part, you use the exact same calls in Serve as you would in Rails to do, you know, helper methods and things like that. And Middleman somewhat follows that. They make some different decisions on certain things.
And I think one uses render and the other uses partial to like call out to. You know,
right.
Yeah. That kind of bugged me when you don't at least adhere to other I guess, what do you call it? Like just patterns, the way that other,
Right. That had been set up. So in that regard, if you're coming from Rails, I think Serve
or
still
things like
has
link
some
to,
advantages.
for example,
Right. But Serve also has a hard time right now exporting certain projects. Like there's more work to be done to make Serve awesome. And Middleman is just much better architected.
So where's Serve at nowadays? Like, is it, where's the priority for you on that? Is it something you're still working on?
Every once in a while I will spend time on Serve. Yeah. Part of
forced.
it for me is that I've like Serve works for me for prototyping Rails applications. It like scratches that itch like really well. And Middleman works for me for static sites like really well. So where Serve could grow is in becoming more like Middleman, right?
And that's not, that doesn't make any sense because there's already
But now
Middleman.
but there's already Middleman, and it's already solving that problem. So I don't know. Having started, I guess if you count Serve, 2 major open source projects, I'm more than content to let them die at this stage because of the amount of management that they take.
I wonder what this says for your track record, John. You create CMSs so they die. Or something like that.
I don't know. I'm just saying that like open source is a ton of work.
Yeah. It is a ton of work.
And I'm happy when another tool that's better comes along and replaces something that I was working on.
What does it happen then? I know we're kind of hanging out on the Serve topic for a little bit, maybe too long, but bear with us, listeners. But for Serve, do you have issues coming in often? Do you have people that are like using it for production and they're bugging you about it? Is that, or is it just kind of quiet?
Yeah, I mean there's probably the biggest thing right now is people really want export to work exactly as it does when it's serving the project. And unfortunately, because of the way rack middleware works and all of that, if you have certain things installed, it's not going to render your site exactly as you wrote it. Now, if you're just doing vanilla Serve, it certainly will. But if you started to do some customization and all of that, the export doesn't know how to read your config.ru to figure out what that extra middleware is doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's some work that needs to be done basically to give Serve a configuration file to store some of those things in, so that it can use it when it's exporting. It can use the configuration part of it to figure out how to rewrite URLs or various things like that. Yeah, and then there's things that like, I mean, just comparing it to Middleman just does so much better. I mean, I love being able to like access in code every single page on my site and build navigation or do whatever I wanted. Whereas with Serve, I would have to like write code to navigate the file system, and there's no concept of like front matter or anything like that. So it's a much different system.
We're going to take a quick pause and give a shout out to our sponsor, FreshBooks. Now, we use FreshBooks, and we absolutely love FreshBooks. We couldn't do business without them, so I was super excited to hear that they were supporting 5x5 in the changelog. So we just kind of got through this tax season, and I bet if you weren't using FreshBooks, your life was probably a bit of a mess. And tell me if this sounds right, if this is you. You're hunting for receipts, digging through invoices, going through every record one by one, and that's the worst, FreshBooks is the simple cloud accounting solution that makes tax time a breeze. And with FreshBooks, you can create professional-looking invoices, capture and track expenses, get real-time business reports with just a couple clicks. And plus, you can work from anywhere with FreshBooks. You got mobile apps, you got one for your phone, you got one for your tablet. You can do it online, through the web. So, anywhere you are, you've got FreshBooks available to you. And like I said, we use FreshBooks. We do a lot of invoicing through sponsorships and partners and stuff like that. So, I mean, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have FreshBooks. I just say it like that. I really don't. It's the bee's knees to our business. And the sooner you start using FreshBooks, the sooner you can start focusing on the work you love. And instead of focusing on your paperwork, you can focus on the work. And for a limited time, you can try FreshBooks for free for 60 days. To get started, visit getfreshbooks.com now and enter the changelog in the How Did You Hear About Us section when signing up. Huge thanks to FreshBooks for sponsoring 5x5 and the changelog. We absolutely love FreshBooks. See, I was never really a huge fan of, I guess, the front matter all the time, because I was for a while there I had to write everything in Haml, and I've since kind of like laid that down. I don't really I don't have to write everything in Haml anymore. But I used to be a diehard Haml fan. Like, I would not write it, and that's probably to my detriment that I wouldn't write it unless it was in Haml. But some front matter mixed with Haml, a Haml file kind of your syntax highlighter kind of gets out of whack or whatever. But I was. Yeah. I like the front matter though of Middleman. I think we were able to like really extend things quite some bit, and kind of going back to the Sass Way. One of the cool things you were doing with this latest version is what was there's an article, I think it's still in a pull request for Sass 3.3.
Yeah, so we wrote an article for Sass 3.3, and what's awesome about this article from a technical perspective is that it has a completely different header from all the other articles, which is something that I want to experiment with, is writing or doing a little bit more art direction, I guess you could say, with our articles. And so there's some HTML code that goes along with that, CSS, all of that. And we couldn't have done that easily with something that wasn't a file-based kind of system. I know there are some plugins for WordPress for shipping custom CSS with each article kind of thing. And I guess if you're writing a lot in HTML or other things like that, then, you could use a plugin and do it in WordPress. But again, you end up with stuff in the database. And if you change something, like, I don't know, there's this awkward relationship on sites like that where
you're kind of mixing code design with content, and it's not a perfect mix.
Well, and what's stored in the database and what's stored on actually in code,
right?
And if you don't store it in your Git repository, it's stored in the database. Then hopefully your database stores versions of stuff that you work on, but a lot of times it doesn't,
right.
And so. And because we can work in pull requests, that can sort of sit on its side with all the code changes that are needed, and then it can be merged in when Sass 3.3 drops. We'll pull that article over, and it'll work perfectly.
Yeah.
But until then, we don't need all of that extra CSS and other stuff, and the site will continue to function. So.
And you were able to pull that additional partial in for that kind of, like you'd mentioned, that art-directed kind of editorial style header, the different header. You were able to do that with just simple YAML or front matter.
Right. Yeah, the front matter concept's pretty powerful. You can add whatever you want to it in Middleman, and then in your layout or whatever it is that you can check that front matter and do something based off of that. There are times too, like one of the differences between Nesta and Middleman was that Nesta had the concept of page title. Is this right? Am I remembering this right? Or was that some sort of custom attribute that you put on there?
I can't recall. I think it did
the way our stuff was set up was that in Nesta we had in the front matter a title attribute.
Yeah.
And Middleman by default didn't have that. The way Nesta works is it grabs the H1.
That's right. Yeah. And I didn't like that. Oh, it drove me crazy.
Not in the front matter, And so I had all these articles that had no titles, right? So so what I did was I wrote a little helper that basically pre-renders the entire HTML. So it gets rendered twice and grabs the H1 and, pulls that out as the title for it. And it works. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. The fact that you could do that in Middleman is pretty awesome to me. That you have access to the whole document. You can render it however you want. It's very customizable.
I like the fact that you were able to do a lot of stuff with the URLs too, like just trimming off things like .html if you had that, and directories with indexes in them becoming pretty URLs. And I think we even had an issue with our comments when we first launched the Sass Way, where we forgot to put the trailing backslash on there, or I think it was on there by default with Middleman, and we wanted to pull it off because the previous version of the site didn't handle or didn't have a trailing backslash on the URL, and that actually caused what is it we use for the comments?
Discus.
Discus. It caused that to think it was a different page, so therefore it had a different comment stream, and we're all just messed up there, but got that fixed. And it's still not technically fixed, but
Yeah, we have the issues still open. We're getting close. You need to spend some time on that on a weekend, or maybe one of our listeners.
Maybe a listener would fix that for us.
You see what's going on here. This is just a giant conspiracy between Adam and me to get you, the listener, to write our code.
Yes.
And our articles.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Let's, speaking of that, let's give some shout outs to those who have contributed to the Sass Way over the years. You got me and you who started it. I don't know if there are any particular order. I'm just going down the contributors list on the Sass Way, which is Mario Ricaldi, Mason Wendell, Peter Gaston, who wrote a book on CSS. I think it was something on CSS3 a couple years ago. Really, really awesome book. I liked it. Roy, not sure how you say your last name. Hugo, how would you say his last name?
I do not know.
You don't know that either?
It's French. So
I won't even try then.
Giradel? I'm not sure.
And then you got Frank S. I don't know why Frank is so elusive with his last name, but Frank S.
Well, that was just the awesome thing. Here's this guy posting from South Africa, and he doesn't want to tell us his last name, and I'm okay with that.
Frank S.
Because he wrote an awesome article for us. He's got some more in the pipe too, I think.
And Daniel Imes, probably Imes, I'm gonna guess. And then over the years too, we've also had Chris Epstein come in and do some technical editing for us. Win Netherland has done some technical editing for us as well, and I don't think either of them really ever planned to write anything. I think Chris is just too busy anyways, and so is Win, but they were definitely Sass fans, of course. Win and Chris wrote the book Sass, and was it Sass and Compass in Action from who's the
Manning, I think.
That's right, Manning. So, obviously huge fans, and, there's been several times when we've had an article go out that we're like, yeah, we need technical eyes on that one. Make sure that what we were talking about actually does make sense, and they come in and kind of do some blessing. But see, we always operated on GitHub before, but we just never had it open. It was in a private repo, and it was, this kind of, so for any of you out there who are rocking out private content-based repos similar to the Sass Way, you might want to consider an open publishing methodology, because I got to say, man, I think the new design definitely lends to it. Being a middleman, being so easy to use, lends to it. But I think the future of the Sass Way is definitely bright, and being able to fork it, and we even have a contributing doc that kind of guides you through actually contributing and whatnot. And I think we've got some plans even to kind of earmark some different topics for people, lack of better terms, maybe assignments, so to speak. And if you want to pick it up, you can pick it up, or bring your own carrot and write about what you want. So that's pretty excited, man. Pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
So So I guess following the normal rhythm of doing a changelog show, I know this time is a little tiny bit different than maybe our past shows, but I still want to treat it the same in some respects. So we always ask some cool questions at the end that we're kind of known for. And the first question I'll ask you, John, is if you weren't writing Sass, what would you be writing?
I mean, definitely CSS, right? I'm so grateful that there is Sass. I mean, or maybe less if less was around. I don't know. If there wasn't Sass, would we have Stylus?
I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, so I do other things as well. I write a lot of JavaScript. I love JavaScript. It's probably my favorite programming language these days. It would have definitely been Ruby. I love Ruby's elegance, but I don't get to do a lot of UI programming in Ruby, and I think that's why I love JavaScript. It just lets me get in there and make stuff awesome. Yeah. I'm not a Haml fan. Sorry.
Yeah, I've become not a Haml fan. I'd rather just keep it simple. I'm almost a purist at that point. Just if I can't, I'd almost just rather write, in the case of a Ruby project, like ERB or straight HTML.
Yeah.
I like the other ways you can do, but I feel like I've kind of turned away from abstractions lately. Like I like, for the hardcore JavaScript developer who wants to use CoffeeScript, that totally makes sense. And I think it makes sense to use it when it makes sense for you and your project and your team. And the same with Sass and CSS, that relationship. I feel like at each layer there's some sort of abstraction, but with HTML, I just felt like it was just didn't make any sense anymore. For a while, I loved it, loved the short and easy syntax, but after a while, it would somehow bite you in the butt. So I just got sick of it. And
yeah, I mean, I had kind of a similar journey with Haml.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember thinking about it in terms of Rails views, and this is technical, but that it seemed to help make our Rails view code cleaner because it forced you to write stuff on one line. And whenever you just inserted a whole block of Ruby code in Haml, it looks just awful. Whereas in a regular view, you can kind of get away with it looking okay. So I did like that effect, but at the same time, struggling with indentation and why is it not rendering, and I don't know. I've sort of backed away from that. I've also backed away from the indented syntax on Sass for similar reasons, in that it's just not enough like regular web development, I think, to merit like making, and it doesn't have enough benefits to merit an entirely new syntax.
Yeah, that's probably an easy way to sum up what I just said. I think that's how I feel. Is like you almost put yourself on an island doing that, and it might be a good island, and like you had said, it might clean up your Rails view code in the case of Haml or something like that. But what you end up doing is you get the community kind of going one direction, and you're over here in another. And you're hanging out in like white space aware land, and it's just, you can't copy somebody else's code from a tutorial, or you can't like easily riff or pair with somebody or kind of share ideas. And I think even for like when you're collaborating over code, it's like, well, you're using one version of the syntax, now I'm using another, so we can't work together, and that's a problem.
Collaboration is really the thing. I mean, I just hate that point in any project where you're like, well, so what's your favorite tool to do this kind of thing? It's like, I'd rather not have to make those decisions in some ways. I mean, even less or Sass or other things like that. I mean, obviously I'm going to choose Sass. I write a blog about the Sass, but
the Sass.
But the fact is, there are going to be some of those battles on every project, and I just wasn't willing to fight the Haml battle.
Yes, that's where I'm at with you. I'm right there. Okay. I guess that was a elongated answer, but totally cool. Okay, so if you had a weekend totally free, no one to hang out with, nothing planned, nowhere to go, you kind of just got this weekend all to yourself. What open source projects are on your radar that you're going to hack with?
Um,
Could be something new. Could be something you've been wanting to play with for a while, but just haven't had the time.
I mean, I've been doing a lot of work with Backbone lately. I have a friend who's a big fan of Angular, um, and I would love to probably do an app in Angular just to get a feel for how that works. Angular seems to have a lot of promise of it's sort of an unstructured. It has structure, but it's unstructured in a way that like I feel like maybe Ember JS is a little too structured in terms of what it and too opinionated in terms of what it does. And then Backbone is like the reverse of that. It's like no structure. And how do you do stuff in Backbone at all? Oh, I got to write my own, you know, it's like writing Rails sometimes. Like you have to write your own big chunks of the framework in order to get it to work. And Angular seems to, I don't know, a little bit more of the right balance. I like their templating stuff. So I would probably, if I was doing a new app, I'd probably work with Angular. That would be one thing. I would be interested probably in using SUSE in Sass on a project. Get a feel for it. I have heard some great things from Eric about SUSE 2. He's been working on.
SUSE is going to be one of the oldest, I guess, we used to call them grid frameworks, and now they've become just bootstraps or frameworks, or I don't know what CSS frameworks. Like it started out as a grid, and it was like it was the one that was, I think I have the story right, where it was based on somebody else's ideas, but it was written specifically with Sass in mind.
Yeah, well, I think that SUSE has been the enduring grid framework in Sass land.
Yeah. It's been there through all the iterations of web development, like it pre-responsive, post-responsive.
Right. Yeah. And I think that like and I'm a big fan of a very modular approach to writing your CSS. So like for the Sass Way, we're using Foundations grid framework actually. So spent a little bit of time and ripped that out so that, you know, we could use it. Because I like one of the things about Foundation is that it has this concept of, for the responsive side of things, like 3 different view. You have your desktop, you have your tablet, and then you have your phone view, essentially. And you can put these classes on things to size it. And as a basic default grid framework, it's amazing. But where like SUSE, like to me has some advantages is in allowing you to just kind of go hog wild and crazy in the way that you implement your framework. Like it has no requirements about like class names that you have to use or
it's all mix-in based then?
It's all mix-in based. You know, I think he has some like generators to make it easier for you. But you can use it without using those grid classes, which some people like about it. I feel like you could use SUSE to kind of create a custom framework for your website. So I'm very interested in it from that way. But again, I mean, I haven't seriously used it. We're using it on one of our user voice sites right now. So I've sort of seen an implementation of it. But yeah, I definitely think there's more to investigate there. Seems like a great framework.
So, Backbone, you're a fan of. If you had a weekend free, you'd be hacking on Angular because you want to play with that, and you've heard lots of good stuff about it. And if your front end would use SUSE.
Yeah, I think so.
And so let's talk about maybe elongate that for like maybe one more minute, which is, how well does Sass fit into, because you have stylus in the JavaScript world, right? You got that's kind of par for the course if you're going to do something there. What happens whenever you want to use something like SUSE, which is it Compass agnostic or is it not?
It's a Compass extension. Yeah. It's built on top of Compass. And the main reason to do that is that, you can basically package it up as a gem, your extension as a gem, and then Compass can load it from that gem. Whereas if you use something else, then you end up in a scenario where you dump your styles, the styles from that thing into a certain directory, and then you have to figure out the loading yourself. Right. So the Compass extensions, it is a true Compass extension in that regard. Yeah.
So you kind of got some hurdles to hop over to hack with Angular and use Compass Ruby-based gems potentially, or at least be both sides of the fence, right?
Yeah. It seems like a lot of Sass stuff is being distributed over Bower, like with JavaScript. So depending on what the back end is, I might end up using, I don't know. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Well, when you cross that bridge and you get that weekend, you let us know. That's for sure. That's what I want to know. All right, last question for you then. This is the fun one too. So, I mean, feel free to think on this one for about a half a second. But who would you say is? Let's open it up for you since you're designer and developer. Who is like your web hero? Who is someone that has kind of like either been guidance to you, maybe it's somebody who taught you early on, somebody took you under their wing, could be whatever, could be, a past school teacher that might have inspired you, but who's someone you would consider a hero to you in terms of web development?
I mean, it's probably... I mean, there's definitely a bunch of people in my life in that way. Different coworkers, bosses, that kind of thing. In terms of a inspirational kind of person, I would probably have to go with Sean Inman, and what he's done in sort of... Sean does design and development, and he's built his own products, and that's kind of the intersection of like all of the things I love. Yeah. So I admire him a whole lot. I would love to do exactly what he's doing right now, getting into like game development, and I don't know. It seems like I love going over to his blog and looking at what he's working on. So he's definitely one. Yeah, I mean, so many web heroes. Douglas Bowman, used to be a big fan of his. I can remember when I was working on Radiant. The way that he had built his site, like I tried to make Radiant so that it could do a site like his really easily. He used to curate links on design and books and all of those types of things. So I wanted Radiant to be able to make it easy to curate those lists of things, and it did. So yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting that when I first got into web development, there were all of these guys that I looked up to, and it seems like some of them are not as active anymore in communicating. Nobody blogs anymore, I guess is what it is.
Everybody microblogs. I mean, it's the Twitter thing, everybody's there.
Yeah, Twitter. So, it's kind of changed. I mean,
well, Doug, you said Douglas Bowman, so he used to blog a lot, and he doesn't blog much anymore. And I think Sean Inman did as well. And I think that was the rage. That was the way we kind of originally began to social network, and then since then, actual social networks with following and actual lists, not blog roles in your sidebar, sort of took over that, replaced that older model, and people, you're right, they do blog a lot less. I think before we kind of had to get our opinions out there, whereas now there's different ways we can share our opinions, like on podcasts and stuff like that. But Sean Inman, I think he's been mentioned at least once before, for sure, as a hero on the show, and I gotta agree, I'm a huge Sean Inman fan. I think I can't even imagine how awesome that guy is to be able to design, code, think through products, and he's a game designer. I mean, like he did that. I forget what the project was called. I think it was called like Retro something on Kickstarter. He and I think 2 or 3 other fellows were doing like really quick iterative game design where like they'd do a game a week or something like that, or a game a month. And it was I backed that and got the T-shirt to prove it, but literally got the T-shirt to prove it. And that wasn't just a joke or something to say, but I think he's an awesome guy, man. I think he is just really talented, and it's those kinds of people that, man, you just wish they shared a bit more.
Yeah, seriously, Doug, why are you not blogging anymore?
Well, I don't mean like, why aren't you blogging every day? But like, they've got such insights to like, Doug is a really, really blessed designer. He's had a really great track history of great design, everything from the version 2, I think, which is kind of forever ago, of Wired, and a number of other like redesigns that he was a part of. And now he's leading design at Twitter, and he's, part of the team that's responsible for all the new great ways Twitter's rolling out their design. So I mean, I don't mean share like that. I mean share some of their wisdom,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a season thing for a lot of those guys. I mean, it's hard to be in the public spotlight in that regard. I've heard that about Sean, that he never really expected to become one of the web gods, I guess you could say. And that he's really a kind of a quiet guy in that regard, humble person. And very talented, but just wasn't expecting to be in the spotlight. And I don't know, yeah. But the fans, we want to know.
We'll have to get Sean on the show, because I mean, I know that he's I'm not sure how active he is in open source, but we'll have to get him to at least release something open source so we can get him on the show. It's kind of like par for the course. You have to,
Oh, you have to release something open source?
I mean, it's the changelog, Open source moves fast. Keep up.
Yeah, so we need a new show where we can just interview our heroes here.
Well, to speak on that, I mean, I think one of the things we want to do here is I would like to have more shows, but the problem that comes into play is the same reason with open source. You just have only a limited amount of time. And so I've just tried to like bite off only as much as I can chew, because if I want to do everything I do to excellence. I don't want to like half-butt anything.
Yeah, I kind of get that. I do wonder about like a special feature though, or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
something to think about.
We'll do it though. I mean, because it's actually an idea I've wanted to do, which was just take the show that we have here, because it's pretty popular. It's on 5x5. Everyone who listens to it loves it. A lot of people write in and say it's their favorite show, and I appreciate everyone who does that. I mean, it certainly lifts our spirits and keeps the team, motivated and whatnot. But I'd like to expand a little bit more on the show and do something a little different. I think the show's great. We have people on. We talk about open source, and it's kind of got this rhythm. But I kind of want to break it up and do not so much more shows, but like different segments. Not always do the same exact show every time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something along the lines of like you have the news every night, but then there's like the morning show and other things like that.
Exactly.
There's got to be room to kind of branch out a little bit.
We're gonna. Long story short, we're gonna play with that idea a bit more, but no promises. We'll see. It's on our to-do list of thinking through. That's for sure. But
yeah,
John, it's been great having you back on the show. I think that in all ways that you contribute to open source, I know that I've certainly learned a lot from you. You've been a great friend over the years, and working with you on the Sass Way and all that it's going to do in the community. It's just looking forward to where we're taking that. And I think, we'll say it here just because I know we're going to do it soon, but we've talked about Sass Weekly or some sort of weekly newsletter we're going to do. So we're starting to execute on that as well. And that'll be open as well, the same as everything else is. I'm really excited about the future, man, for us.
Yeah, me too. Very, very excited about it.
And yeah, the sassway.com, go there. GitHub.com/thesassway. Got a couple repos there. We've got our identity repo there if you need to use a logo. By the way, we didn't even get to mention that, but Berman Painter, thank you so much for your hard work on Sass's logo, and then subsequently our inheritance of your skills to rock out the Sass Way. And then I guess you, John, for your tweaked version of it, right? Your tweaked version is a little bit different than Berman's, but using his art. So it's good stuff. Yeah,
Berman got it going for us, and then I sort of put together the final part of it. But it's his brushstrokes that are amazing.
But yeah, thesassway.com, github.com/thesassway if you want to fork the repo and share your thoughts. Open an issue if you just want to chime in with us and say hello. I mean, issues don't have to just be problems. They could be ideas. Say hello. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on your what gets you excited about Sass and writing CSS the Sass Way, and just what gets you excited about design. So share your thoughts. But I also want to give a shout out to our sponsors of the show, DigitalOcean and TopTal, for supporting the show. We definitely love you guys. DigitalOcean.com and TopTal.com, TOPTAL.com. Somebody wrote in and said, I'm not sure what you say when you say TopTal, Adam. Is it top like towel, like a bath towel? And I'm like, I can't help it. They got a hard to pronounce business name. It's TopTal, TOPTAL.com. But yeah, John, thank you so much for joining us today on the show, and thanks so much for all that you do. Until we hear from you again, let's say goodbye for now.
Okay. Thanks so much.